There had never been anything like it before. There's been nearly a half-century of attempting to duplicate it since. The 1968 debates between intellectual giants and ideological polar opposites, William F. Buckley and Gore Vidal, which were scheduled around that year's political convention. Here's just a taste of one of them.
In the United States, 5% of the population have 20% of the income, and the bottom 20% have 5% of the income.
I think this is
This seems to me, I know that you revel in that kind of inequality.
No. I think it's sort of because
business is based upon
you
it.
see, I believe that freedom breeds inequality. And that,
say that again.
Freedom breeds inequality. Now, I'll say it a third time.
No, twice was enough.
Was that last week or 1968? That debate series is the subject of a new documentary. It's terrific, called Best of Enemies. Robert Gordon co-directed it, and he joins me now. Robert, it's great to see you.
Thank you. Happy to
Unbelievable.
be here.
So NBC had Huntley and Brinkley, legendary. Walter Cronkite on CBS. Was this an act of desperation by ABC just to play the game?
It absolutely was. They were in third place. They would have been in fourth, but there were only 3 networks. They were that far behind. And they got these 2 guys who they knew had a dislike between them, and they hoped that they might create sparks, but Buckley and Vidal actually had forest fires.
You have a great soundbite from the legendary Frank Rich saying something like, the conventional wisdom is the way to end the Vietnam War is put it on ABC and it'd be canceled in 13 weeks.
Yeah.
But you know, when you watch this, upper crust intellectuals, not the kind of people you'd think an audience would relate to. So what was it? Was it the brain? Was it the conflict? What drew audiences to this thing?
I think 2 things. It was the brains and it's the tension. These 2 guys had a dislike that stemmed from early in the 1960s and was somewhat in public prior to that. So in '68, when they get together, there's already a tension between them, and it takes they're together for 10 episodes over the Republican and Democratic conventions.
Miami Beach and Chicago, and everybody remembers what happened in Chicago with Mayor Daley and the riots and all that sort of stuff.
And this slow burns over that time, and people started to lean in closer to their TVs.
And people should know, unlike now with all these posers in these debates, these guys really hated each other, were really ideological opposites. There's no pretense at all in terms of the conflict.
These are not frenemies.
You know, one of the things, I know this is obvious, but it bears saying, your movie is beyond fascinating as an historical piece, but it's much more fascinating to me, and I'm sure to you, and the point I made about that income inequality thing, is when they're debating Vietnam, for example. You could take Vietnam out, plop in Iraq or Afghanistan, and virtually every word could remain in place. What is it, 47 years later?
So I saw a bootleg DVD of these raw debates in 2010. And I had that exact same reaction. I was like, oh my God, this could be today. Except that these guys are so high-minded. They bring so much to the table in their dispute. It's not name-calling. It's real engagement with bitter hatred.
Excuse me. There was a little bit of name-calling. This was the exchange that was. Watch this.
As far as I'm concerned, the only sort of pro or crypto Nazi I can think of is yourself. Failing that, I would only say that we can't have
now listen, you
the right of assembly.
Stop calling me a crypto Nazi.
Let's stop calling names.
You in your goddamn face, and you'll stay plastered.
Listen, you queer, he says, on live television.
Yes.
And I understand, I think in the New York Times, it was cut out of the West Coast version.
Yes, that's what we heard.
So the aftermath of this in 1968, from what I learned from your film, Gore Vidal thought that was the moment at which he essentially won the whole thing.
Right.
And is it too strong to say that even though he never admitted it, Buckley was tormented by this for the rest of his life?
Absolutely, but this was an event, you know, even in the pre-YouTube days, this didn't go away. They were asked about it all the time. Interesting revelation about each of them in their response. Bill Buckley always demurred, a polite, I have nothing to say on the matter. Vidal, the provocateur, every time he was asked about this, you know, he threw a new grenade.
Who was the guy who Buckley was doing in your movie, interviewing with late in his life, when the guy said to him, do you have any regrets?
Any regrets? Charlie Rose.
Charlie Rose. And he paused for a moment that seemed like an eternity and said something like, not that I choose to share with you. So you know, not only is this transferable, again, 68 to 2015, which people will take away from the movie in 2 seconds, this was the harbinger of incivility in
on TV.
Public debate on television, was
Absolutely.
it not? It all flowed from this in 1968.
And it was kind of a revelation to us that came out in the research that the other networks who made fun of ABC for this going in then imitated it coming out. Convention coverage was never the same.
Used to be wall to wall, right?
Used to
From
be
beginning
gavel
to
to
end
gavel.
on NBC and CBS.
Never again.
Not after this.
Not after this. And the whole notion of getting contentious dialogue, you know, allowing that. This prior to this point, it was very civil and kind of very buttoned down and black and white and boring. And this was the introduction of that uncivility, which I think TV has sort of scientifically designed to be all explosion, punctuating the commercials, and they've lost that sense of content.
Can I tell you, this is, you know, it's a great film. I loved it, and I'm so glad you're here, Robert Gordon. It's a pleasure
Thanks
to
very
meet
much.
you. Thank you so much.